Welcome to the Succession Podcast, a podcast by Lane Brothers Investment Counsel. Follow a founder on his journey to successfully transition his 3-decade-old practice to the next generation of advisors and clients. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Carson Partners, a division of CWM LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Succession Podcast. My name is Joe Allen, wealth advisor with Lane Brothers Investment Counsel. And as always, I'm joined by
Kevin Lane, founder, senior wealth advisor, Lane Brothers Investment Counsel.
And I'm Megan Lane, associate wealth advisor and director of operations with Lane Brothers Investment Counsel.
So on today's episode, we're going to put Kevin in the hot seat.
Ooh.
So an industry veteran, we're going to ask some questions, Megan and I. And I suspect even our long-term clients will learn something new about Kevin, very possibly. Maybe even Megan, who we didn't disclose is the daughter of Kevin. It's possible Megan will learn something new through these questions as well. You never know. So my first question, and this is one that's a easy giveaway if I were to delay this question about 2 questions and then test somebody, just ask them, give them one choice as to where you were born, they would get it right. But let's start with that. Kevin, where were you born? Where were you raised?
I was born in Long Beach, New York, which is a barrier island.
Nobody would have guessed that.
Nobody would have guessed that. It's a barrier island off of Long Island, 25 miles from New York City, Manhattan. And it was a wonderful place to grow up. Still a wonderful place to live. We got a lot of good friends and family that are still there, and got a lot of fond memories of being raised in Long Beach, Long Island.
So how long were you there?
I spent my formative years there up through age 18. My dad was a cop. He was actually the police commissioner at one point, achieved all 7 ranks of distinction, was chief of detectives for 15 out of the 30 years. So my formative years were there through up to 18. And then when my dad retired, we moved to Florida, and I did my college in Florida. But I would return back to Long Beach for the summers and continue to spend a lot of time in Long Beach before I moved out to Arizona. And it's still my go-to stop when I do go back east to meet clients in New York or go back for other reasons. So very interesting town. Some famous people from Long Beach are Billy Crystal, the comedian, grew up there. I had the opportunity of actually playing basketball on the East School playground with Billy Crystal I was a teenager and he was a bit older. Larry Brown, famous coach in college, is from Long Beach, and from the music scene, Joan Jett is from Long Beach.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so and there's some others I'm sure I'm missing, but it was so it's a wonderful little spot that's come back since being wiped out from Superstorm Sandy in 2012.
Your dad really set the bar pretty high.
He did.
Jury's still out as to whether you're living up to the bar that he set.
This is true. He did set a high bar for the 5 issues, 4 boys and 1 girl. That's for sure.
So growing up, did you play any sports or did you have any hobbies that you were particularly interested in?
I did. Basketball was my game. I was a tall kid, and I did fairly well at that, mostly on the intramural side. The high school I went to, I didn't make it. I was the last one cut from freshman, but that high school was rated #1 public and private school in New York State. So it was a real powerhouse basketball school in Rockville Center, Long Island. But we played a lot of basketball, a little bit of tennis, and of course anything surrounding the beach, body surfing, and beach activities, etc. And in the wintertime, we found people's homes to hang out in, basements and stuff. Played a lot of chess, just to stay out of the cold winter temperatures and stuff. But that was primarily the sports that kept me busy was basketball.
And you've been, of course, in this industry for over 30 years, but is there any particular memorable job that you held prior to this? Something that either you're proud of, people that would be surprised of, a really fun job, or just memorable?
Yeah, so I think in high school I thought I might want to go to Wall Street. Certainly appealed to me for the entrepreneurial, the wealth building, the excitement of the markets day to day. And I made that decision by my junior year of college. And I actually interviewed and got a job offer with a Wall Street firm before I graduated. And I immediately upon graduation went up and joined the Wall Street firm in March of 1980. This was still the depths of the very bad bear market that had been going through most of the 70s. Really did not bottom until August of 1982. But my game plan was to spend 2 or 3 years in New York getting as much industry knowledge, foundational knowledge as possible, and then return to Palm Beach to be a stockbroker, because that was ultimately my goal, was to be a stockbroker to work with individuals on investments. I had a standing offer from the Palm Beach office with that firm to come back. I wound up in New York 2.5 years, and then instead of coming to Palm Beach, I went out to Scottsdale, Arizona, which was equally exciting opportunity with the same firm, branch, above average successful young brokers back then, and a chance to live in the western United States. So that's what brought me west. As far as memorable jobs, my first job assignment was assigned to an audit task force because at the time the Wall Street firm had merged with another, and the conversion program was a complete computer fiasco. And so they had a lot of operational problems. So that was a real baptismal of fire, because when I started, I literally worked 2.5 months, 7 days a week, an afternoon off, and then another 6 weeks, 7 days a week, and loved every minute of it. And it was a center point of getting broad exposure to many departments within the firm, and a little bit of a spotlight. And from there, the soon-to-be president of the firm recruited me over to the marketing department. So I was very blessed just to be at the right place, the right time, and through hard work, it kind of worked out. So that's probably was the most memorable thing to start the career.
Yeah, what a way to kick things off. Yeah. And spoiler alert, I know you know this, but not everybody else knows this, but I also made that shift from New York to Arizona. So more on that in the future.
Right.
But it was a very similar shift that we made.
Right. Right.
So do you recall any defining moment that made you really realize that you wanted to be in this industry, or even after you were already working in the industry, if you just had a realization that this was your calling in life and this was something that you wanted to dedicate your time to?
Yeah, that's a good question. It just really, I think, was attracted to it for the reasons cited earlier. Every day is different. So that I think there's nothing boring about the industry if you're in the the investment side, for sure. I was on a pretty fast track on the corporate side. I could have stayed in New York, but I chose to move out west and go into production as a stockbroker. And of course, back then that was a commission transaction business. And I remember going home one afternoon thinking I made a grave mistake, because my salary was going down 10% a month, and the commissions really weren't making up the difference, and I was really worried I didn't really make the right move. And then magically, the 5th month, my commissions came in, and I made more money that month than I did the previous year in New York. Now, that wasn't a sustainable thing on a month-to-month basis, but I think that was the defining point where, there was a lot of high risk to come out, parachute into Phoenix, not know anyone, cold call over the telephone back then, and on the 5th month, realized I did make the right decision and stayed the course.
Well, only 5 months. I mean, I'm sure at the time you're pretty nervous, but you zoom out a little bit, you think, well, it was a 5-month period. It could have been worse.
It could have absolutely been worse, and it wasn't all easy street. This is the downside of the business we're in. You live with the ebbs and flows, right? We have bear markets, bull markets, recessions, inflation, disinflation, and I think the accomplishments are try to be able to navigate that and navigate it on behalf of the people that entrust you to be a steward of their money. That makes it all the more, I think, satisfactory as far as being able to accomplish that. So we'll get into a lot in further episodes, but being able to work with people and people on a sustained long period of time is very rewarding.
Yeah, and certainly experiencing those different market situations. And it only solidifies both, I mean, I guess your confidence in reassuring clients, but also put some weight behind that reassurance that, no, we have gone through this before, and maybe this time is a little bit different for one reason or another, but help reassure the clients that, it's similar to this time in the past or that time in the past, and here's how we can navigate that. So having that experience, having been through those different market situations, I think lends to a lot of credibility.
Well, it absolutely does. Look, I have the gray hairs to prove it, but I've been through the '87 crash, the '97 Asian tiger crash, the '98 long-term capital meltdown, the 2000 dot-com crash, 2008 great financial meltdown, the COVID crash, and then subsequent rebound. So, it brings a sense of gravitas to having gone through that. And I think that does help, especially being a student of history. History does have a sense of rhyming, and I think it's important that people, and I think the people that work with us, they appreciate that we have that experience at the table. And if I can impart that down to the next generation, that's a good thing.
So you mentioned the gray hairs. There's a picture floating around on the internet, and I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants it, where you had a mustache. So some people lose hair on their head after a certain number of years. You lost the hair on your upper lip.
Yes,
apparently.
I did. Yes, I did. So some have accused me of false advertising since I don't have that mustache any longer. But it looked a lot better on me in the 80s than it does in the 2020s.
So given the, many, many years of experience in industry and working with clients, what is one common mistake that you've seen investors make over the years?
Oh, I think lack of patience and trying to time markets. There's an old saying on Wall Street that the market timer's Hall of Fame has no one in it. And I think that is the thing that we try to stress with people. And I think that's why we've been successful in working with clients on a sustained long period of time. There's a fair amount of our clients that in many cases have dealt with me going back to 82, 83 when I cold called them in Phoenix or Scottsdale, Arizona, and we're now working with them 4 decades in and or nearly 4 decades in, and in some cases their kids. So I think, the markets are wonderful places to build wealth if you're patient. You don't make too many turns, because when you make turns, you're either going to pay taxes or you're going to have opportunity costs of when do you get back in, what do you replace it with. The sell decision is always, I found, the hardest. So if I think anything we've gotten better at is finding our own level of patience and toning down the need to react to things. I think if more people followed that, there would be less pain in the financial world.
So patience, and I think the other thing that helps, I believe, and we get this feedback from clients, is our communication. So even maybe though we're not as excited about certain things going on in the market, but communicating and educating on if it is something they should be concerned about or when they should be concerned about it, or you've done a lot of writing and sharing perspectives as well.
I have, and I enjoy writing. A great deal of my time is spent reading and kind of evaluating, and we try to look at things from longer-term social, economic, political trends, and to try to basically tap into those long-term trends, because if you do, you kind of have the wind at your back, and it doesn't matter what those things do in 3 months, but if you're right on 3, 6, and 10 years on a particular trend, it's the better part of building wealth. And I think the successful people in the industry, if you look at them and basically try to emulate them, you'll be better off, and your balance sheet will be better off. So yeah, that's an ongoing challenge.
So I wanted to ask you if you considered yourself more of a half full or half empty of a glass kind of person, but I can definitely answer that for you. Absolutely a half full sort of guy. And I think that anyone that knows Kevin would agree with that. But maybe take that question and answer it from like a business perspective or a market's perspective, considering the volatility that we've dealt with, especially in the last year.
Yeah, great question. So I definitely am an optimist. I don't know too many pessimists that are in this business and successful. In some respects, the most optimistic people in the world are farmers, right? They plant and they have all these things that work against them, climate and all sorts of things. So in some respects, we're farmers, right? We're creating a business and trying to nurture it and grow it, et cetera. So I think you have to be an optimist. I think where you have to be a pessimist is to have a level of suspicion and be somewhat circumspect relative to Wall Street and the products that are created, and knowing when to avoid things that develop into a bit of a mania or excesses. And I think we have a good track record of highlighting those excesses and avoiding them, and we have writings that are in the archives that demonstrate that. So that's part of it is not getting caught up in the overenthusiasm, which is always in place with markets. On the contrary, you don't want to fall into a depression when things are in a big corrective mode or depressed, et cetera. There too lie opportunities as well. So it's more of a art than a science a lot of times in trying to toggle between those two. But I think you definitely need to be optimistic. Look, people want to work with uplifting people, not depressive downers. And I think that's true in any industry, but especially in the investment world.
Absolutely. So what was your drive and your reasoning for forming Lane Brothers in 1990?
I think, to pick up on my last point, I just became disillusioned with the transaction mentality of Wall Street, the sell side of the business, as they like to say back then, and getting away from the commission side. And to me, and I was one of the early pioneers that did this. This is now very popular for people to leave Wall Street firms and start independent firms. It wasn't back in 1990. It was pretty high risk. But it was that ability to work with clients in more of a fiduciary, more of a peaceful, more client-centric focus that really spurred my interest to do Lane Brothers. In the tail end of working with the Wall Street firm, I had started to work with marquee money managers in placing clients' money with them external to the Wall Street firm. And I think that gave me the appreciation of the money management, fiduciary side of the business, and that ultimately gave me the impetus to start Lane Brothers. And it was a very modest beginning. It was only $6.5 million of assets, charter clients of Lane Brothers that had the confidence to come with me on that journey, and a number of them are still with us today.
It's pretty impressive, right, to break out from a more well-known, maybe Wall Street firm and basically set up your own shop, hang your own shingle, So, certainly there was some risk behind that for you, but also for the clients. And I think it speaks to the service, the trust that, that you instilled in them, that they would even follow you to the unknown in some way, right? I know one question that I get very commonly, not long after I joined Lane Brothers, aside from people asking, what is Lane Brothers and how is it different than maybe some of the big firms out there? Who are these other brothers? I've never met these other brothers, and yet the name of the firm is Lane Brothers. Who are these other brothers?
That's a good question. And some people do, so usually new clients say, where's the other brother, et cetera. There's a long tradition on Wall Street, and maybe it's a little bit arcane at this point, but down through history, you've had Kuhn Brothers, Salomon Brothers, Lehman Brothers, Brown Brothers, Harriman. So, there was, when it was more of a male-dominated business, there was a lot of firms that brothers worked together, and they named it, with the brothers as a part of the title. So in forming Lane Brothers, my older brother was in the tax business in Palo Alto, California. So the original design to Lane Brothers was he would do the tax work, and I would do the portfolio management side. So that was the first Lane Brothers, my older brother Joe. And 5 years later, Tom Lane was available, and he joined as chief financial officer and put us on the right ship as far as our internal structure and reporting and managing it. And then in between all of that, our sister Patty also was working part-time to help this process. As a matter of fact, she wanted to change the name to Lane Brothers and Slave Sister, and we didn't think that was a good marketing term. But Patty was also very instrumental. She had worked also with a Wall Street firm and a money manager out of Boston, and so she had some deep industry experience. In 2008, she'd made a mid-career change, went to law school and graduated successfully. She's got a thriving law practice in Scottsdale, Arizona today. So it's very much a family affair. In around 2000, the other two brothers had left to go on and do other things, and it was myself and an assistant for 14 years, and then we expanded, and we'll get into this in some later podcasts as far as bringing on a financial planner and offering more consultative services. And those were really instrumental things that allowed the firm to double its assets under management inside a 10-year period. So the business has definitely evolved, from conventional stock and bond management to today a more robust financial planning, wealth planning, consultative, as well as money management business.
Sure. So sisters get no respect. The name doesn't change. It stays with the brothers. We'll talk about in future podcasts Megan's introduction to the firm, in addition to the firm, and it's not Lane Brothers and Daughter or something like that.
That sounds more like a plumbing company.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that doesn't really work.
Doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
Okay, well, good to know. Now we can answer that question of who are these other brothers.
So what's something about yourself that you think would actually surprise people to know about you?
That's a good question. I'm working with people a long time. There are probably not too many surprises. I guess one thing that would come out is I'm a poet. I write poetry. And I wouldn't say it's done on a daily basis. It's when something strikes me. And a lot of it is more geared towards familiar aspects of life, family members, poignant events, etc. But I love reading poetry, some of the classics, and so I guess that would be one surprise. We're kind of in the very staid business. Even rock stars don't have people that look like rock stars managing their money, right? We're pretty low key. We just kind of dress conservatively, etc. But we obviously have outside interests and stuff. So that would be one surprise. It's on the website, so it shouldn't be a surprise anymore.
Well, so I'm a big fan of morning routines. I think it sets the tone for the day. You get to choose, what kind of the mindset you want to start the day with, the tone you want to set, the things you want to accomplish to kick off your day. You mentioned writing and reading and things like that, but do you have any particular consistent morning routine?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably the favorite part of the day for me, actually. I remember as a kid growing up, I used to love to sleep in. Well, that changed when I moved out to Arizona because you had to be at your desk by 6:30 opening of the markets. So I was conditioned very early since the 80s to be up early, and that continues today. So I'm generally up 4 a.m., 5 a.m., even on weekends. But I love it. It's the quiet time for the coffee, the reading. It's the best time that I do my writing, whether it be, writing towards messaging things out to clients or just getting my head around certain subject matters. And it's, my dad used to kiddingly say it's the best time of the day, a cup of coffee, you have the newspapers, no one around to bother you. So that was the running joke. But I do appreciate that. And then I also welcome, when my wife wakes up, having another cup of coffee with her and we start our day. But that's kind of my morning routine. Is tuning into markets, reading, coffee, quiet time.
Well, we definitely agree on that. I joke that, it's maybe a sign of getting old when you'd rather get up early and drink coffee than stay up late and party, But I'm the same way. I think, but for me, it started just from having young kids, and really that was the only time that I could control. It just had to do with me getting out of bed a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I could enjoy the benefits of a quiet house for a little while, do some reading, things like that. So that's why I'm a big fan of the morning routine as well.
And going off that a little bit, you're definitely one of the most avid readers I've ever met in my life. And you've been that way probably your whole life, definitely my whole life. I remember even as a teenager, whenever I'd wake up, you would already have a whole stack of newspapers that you had completely finished for the morning, and it's only 8 a.m. So going off that, is there anything, what's the most interesting thing that you've read recently?
Well, that's a good question. So after quite a few attempts, I finally have weaned off the newspapers and have trained myself to read the newspapers on my iPad. And that took a while because I like the feel of the newspaper, and that's what you're used to. But no question about it, it's a lot cleaner. It's easier to pick up the iPad wherever you are in the world and be tapped into your news source without having to wait for a delivery or one that's not going to show up. So I still am an avid reader of news. I think the most interesting book I recently just finished, and I passed it on to Joe, and the title escapes me, and that's probably just as well, because then we don't have to worry about it being excised out as far as a recommendation. But it was a true story written by two journalists having to do with the financial scandal that came out of Malaysia. And I'll not reference names so we don't have to worry about compliance purposes. But this was a particular crook, I will say that, who's still on the lam, but they are circling him. So it looks like he's probably going to be brought to justice. That hoodwinked one of the sovereign wealth funds out of Asia to the tune of billions of dollars. And it was a fascinating story of how he accomplished this. And it was just mind-boggling how this nothing of a person that came from a modest background, was educated in the Ivy Leagues in the United States, was able to get a seat at the table of power and convince an awful lot of people to do nefarious and fraudulent things. So that was a very interesting read. And it also, I think, underscores to be somewhat circumspect of how much corruption drives some of those economies over there. And it makes us even more, I think, careful about how our money is allocated to places around the world that, don't follow the rule of law.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We won't give the name of the book, but not only hoodwink the foreign dignitaries, but even a lot of Hollywood folks here on stateside as well. So,
absolutely,
prominent people in the business and Hollywood and things like that. So
right.
It's pretty interesting, and something I never even really heard of the guy. Right. Reading the book and hearing some of the stories, it sounds familiar, but it's really interesting.
Well, he was a very strangely not really a charismatic guy, but he was a very devious person. And look, he didn't do it all himself. He was able to accomplish this with crooked bankers on Wall Street and crooked politicians and greedy people from everywhere, from Hollywood, New York, Dubai, Malaysia, pick your spot. It was really a fascinating story of a guy that hopefully he's not going to get away with it. Other people have got caught up, and they are serving time in jail now. But they're circling him just more recently. I've been following the authors. They have their own podcast, actually, on the trail of hopefully getting this guy to justice. Yeah.
Well, I think we should get Kevin off the hot seat for now, and we may reserve the right to put him back on later. But hopefully everybody learned a little something about Kevin. I think that's a wrap for now. You guys think?
I think so.
Like I like to say, you guys did a great job, and you're both going to get a certificate of participation today.
Here we go.
Okay,
Boomer.
And if you're a client and you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of our team members directly. And if you're an advisor, work in the industry, and you would like to have a conversation, you can reach us at info@lanebrothers.com.
So thanks for joining us on episode 2 of the Succession podcast, learning a little bit more about the founder, Kevin Lane. On our next episode, we're going to dig right into when Kevin realized that a succession plan was needed and some of the first steps that he took to get that going. So thanks again for joining us. Join us next time. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Find all of the Succession episodes on lanebrothers.com/podcast. If you found any portion of this episode helpful, please like or share it with a friend. The opinions voiced in Succession with Kevin Lane, Joe Allen, and Megan Lane are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Succession are not affiliated with CWM LLC, investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Carson Partners, a division of CWM LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors.